Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Niall. We have just seen David Benavidez stay undefeated and beat Anthony Yarde tonight in Riyadh. Niall, good to speak to you again. Maybe kind of not the scintillating finish we wanted from what's been a very good card of boxing tonight. Give us your instant reaction to what we've just seen, seventh round stoppage for David Benavidez.
Yeah, I thought it was an excellent performance from Benavidez, the main kind of takeaway from that, and we might get on to kind of what version of yard this was, but he stopped them kind of, you know, sooner or around the same time as Beterbiev. He hasn't gone further than Arthur Beterbiev took yard, but yeah, it was just a really rough watch. We kind of touched there just before we started and saying that Yard was never going to win the fight realistically. It would have been a big upset if he won that fight. But I thought he started the fight well, relatively well considering. I thought looked decent on the outside, looked kind of relatively quick. Done well, kind of the odd occasion, and that kind of pick counter punching of David Benavidez, but it was never enough to actually win rounds. He was kind of it was never enough to conclusively win a round, but he just couldn't deal with the pressure and the volume of David Benavidez. And once that nose went, that was absolutely the beginning of the end. It became a mess straight away, and yeah, I'm just glad that it didn't go too much longer for Anthony Yarde. I think it's a good stoppage by the ref, but I think if it had went further, we would have seen the tell, and rightly so. But yeah, credit to Benavidez, job done in emphatic fashion there.
Yeah, for sure. I think the when it was stopped, I wasn't sure. But then the fact that there was 30 seconds, not 30 seconds later, a couple of minutes later, there were no protests from Team Yard, whether it was from Anthony Yard himself, from Tunde Ajayi. So I think that speaks volumes over whether it was a good stoppage or not. I think the fact that Yards um, didn't win a round, if he did win a round, it was just maybe just the one round out of seven. So I was quite relieved to see that fight, to see that fight stop, to be honest. You mentioned Beterbiev there, Niall. I think I was there that night in London. It was a fantastic fight a couple of years ago, a fight of the year contender. And Yards, as we know, was winning on the scorecards at the time and gave Beterbiev a really good test. And he's lost it around the same time of the fight tonight against Benavidez, but in different, very different fashion, you could say. Um, do you think, what do you think's next for Anthony Yarde? Because I feel like he's been an entertaining fighter, but some would say since that Beterbiev defeat a couple of years ago, he's not looked great. Had a close fight against Lyndon Arthur last time out. He's kind of gone back to fighting substandard opposition. Do you think that could be it, or do you think he's kind of got another run in him?
Yeah, it's a bizarre one, isn't it? He's had one of, if not the most bizarre career management that I've seen in a long time. His career path has been just crazy. He's gone from fighting nobody's no disrespect. Well, Lyndon Arthur aside, but very substandard opposition, and then straight in with the likes of Beterbiev, Kovalev, and David Benavidez. So it's it's one of those that how long are we gonna keep saying this for Yard? Who would we like to see him fight next? We almost talk about him like he's still a prospect or he's still a hopeful. He's 34 now
Yeah.
and he's had his chances. And he's come up short, which there's no shame in it. But yeah, as I say, what's left to prove now or what's left to achieve, I should say, at 34 years old, especially after that beating that he took tonight. For his own sake, you'd like to kind of say maybe ride off into the sunset if you've made your money. But then if he carries on, You know, what fights would there be? There'd be a Joshua Buatsi fight possibly in the in the UK. It'd still be, a relatively big fight in the UK. But is it does Anthony Yard want to kind of stick around for just big domestic fights now when he's made his money already? So I'd like to see him walk away. I know he's had his detractors. I like Anthony Yard, but yeah, I just think at 34 now, this is it. You're never gonna get higher than what you've done so far. So yeah, walk away from me.
I think that's the factor for me. 34 years old, you're unlikely to get better. Tonight was his 31st fight. Tonight was the third time he's been stopped. That's just my gut feeling, and I think that the Boetsi fight could happen next, but it's not the fight it was. Yard's coming off a stoppage loss. Boatsi's coming off a fight that he should have lost. So that fight, I don't think that fight can happen next, but could it happen? Maybe kind of in the summer, maybe, but it would have a Brooke Khan feeling to it, in my opinion. And I just don't think it's a massive fight. To be honest, I'm not convinced it sells hugely well, but we'll see. I think with Yards, there's I'm not against Yard just wanting to prove he's the best light heavyweight in Britain. Um, I think if Wheelie Hutchinson can beat Ezra Taylor, I think that could be an interesting fight. Um, the winner of Craig Richards Dan Aziz, maybe. I'm not against these fights. I just don't want to be here in a year's time when Yard kind of fights for a world title again, and we see the same sort of thing happen, whether it's against Bivol or a Batavian rematch, for example, and we're in the same situation, but we'll see. Back to Benavidez now. I did the final prediction video with Danny on this fight a couple of days ago. We were both correct, in case anyone wanted to know. But Danny mentioned Benavidez moving up to cruiserweight. It's been rumored he could fight Zurdo Ramirez. Looking at him tonight, how he made 168, I have no idea. Um, I think at the moment it's all a bit kind of strange what's happening with this Bivol Beterbiev trilogy. We have no idea if that fight's going to happen, when it's going to happen. But if Benavidez is going to fight either of those men, I think he's going to have to wait around for around a year, in my opinion. Thoughts on that? Can Benavidez be an effective cruiserweight in your opinion?
Absolutely, yeah. I mentioned, you said it on the final predictions video, the commentary said it tonight. I think I love the idea of a Zurdo fight. Only if, as you say, he can't get the Beterbiev Bivol fights, because that's all that's really around from at 175. You know, the only possible would maybe be Callum Smith while he's waiting on Beterbiev or Bivol, if Smith beats David Morrell. But yeah, just the big fights from are Beterbiev or Dmitry Bivol at 175. But if not, if he can't get them, yeah, I think he can absolutely be effective at cruiserweight. Not saying he beats Zurdo. Um, I wouldn't kind of confidently pick him to beat Zurdo, but it's a winnable fight for both of those men. They both fancy the win. I think it'll be a close fight. And it'll be hugely popular, with the kind of Mexican community, Mexican fans in the south of America, they'd have to do that fight in Mexico. You'd imagine. I think it'd be huge, or Texas, Arizona, somewhere like that down south. So yeah, I'd love to see that. As you say, I know it's been said constantly about Benavidez, but how did he ever make 168? He even looks big. He looks big for light heavyweight. Never mind super middleweight, but I know he's had his weight issues in the past with 168, but it's just crazy. And who knows? It might be like Zurdo Ramirez. Although he was effective at 175 and 168, we might see the best of Benavidez at cruiserweight. We might still see the best of him there. So yeah, I'd love that fight. If it's not either of the big two, that's the fight for me.
Yeah, and I think, look, maybe it's the theme of tonight that fighters need to be in their correct weight divisions. We've seen a more energetic, more entertaining Devin Haney tonight at welterweight, and I think just we've seen a Benavidez who still be effective at light heavyweight, but possibly stayed at super middleweight for too long. Should have moved up earlier. And now, yeah, just kind of, I think it would be, I'd love to see him a cruiserweight. And actually, without getting too ahead of ourselves, I think that David Benavidez would fight Jaya Pitaya. Gilberto Ramirez, I don't think he wants to fight Jaya Pitaya, or his team don't want him to fight Jaya Pitaya. I'm not convinced that fight's ever going to happen. I think Gilberto Ramirez would rather fight David Benavidez in still a big fight, in a fight that he maybe thinks he has a better chance of winning than fight Jaya Pitaya. So, yeah, hopefully exciting time. Benavidez, he's someone who can maybe kind of, I think he's someone who can move into the pound for pound rankings next year. I really think he can. Final question from me to you now as we round off the evening. How would Benavides get on against Beterbiev or Bivol? I know it's a tough question, but here we are. We might never know the answer. Does he beat either of them, neither of them, one of them for you? What are your thoughts?
I think Dimitri Bivol would be a bit too clever for him, in
Hmm.
my opinion. I just think he might bamboozle him a bit too much. Which there's no shame in that. Obviously, he's phenomenal, Bivol. But Herbiev and Benavidez is an outstanding fight for me. It really is. Like, it's hard to bet against Artur Beterbiev at this stage. Even at this stage, I should say, but it might be a case of he's just had one injury too many. Just
Yeah.
a bit too much miles on the clock now at this stage. So, Benavidez would have, I'd give him a big chance of beating Better BF, but would it surprise you if Better BF came back and looked like his old self and picked Benavidez off apart eventually and stopped him? No, it wouldn't surprise me. He's just such a freak of nature, but I just think stylistically, Arthur Better BF or David Benavidez would kind of expose the injuries and the mileage on Better BF's clock for me, but phenomenal fights.
Fingers crossed. You never know. I think Benavides is fantastic, but you kind of consider he could have had Canelo on his resume. He could have Bivol, Beterbiev on his resume, and he doesn't have any of those guys. So you hope that we see him in some big fights in the next 12 months or so. Niall, thank you as always for your time. I'll speak to you again very soon.
Cheers, take care.